This is Catherine Dubberly, the Answer Lady, having a ball on my Kiss loom, making double comfort slippers. You can make some too. Let's get going. Let's talk for a minute about the gauge and the kind of fabric that is suitable for knitting slippers. In my opinion, a sweater, possibly a cowl, various things where you would like drape, you would want fabric that's somewhat looser than this. This is a firm fabric, but that is on purpose because I don't see there's any need for drape in a pair of slippers. What we want is firmness so that they hold their shape when we walk in them, and warmth. So in this yarn, I have it adjusted to get 4 stitches, 6 rows, using my small gauge loom without any washers at all. If I were knitting myself a sweater with this identical yarn, which, by the way, is Mary Maxim Starlet, and I find it to be a worsted weight, or otherwise known as number 4 yarn in the U.S., that's a little bit on the thicker end of the number 4s. You know, each one is a range. Each number covers a range. This is towards the upper end, though not the thickest number 4 I know. And if I were knitting myself a sweater, depending on what the sweater was for, I might have 2 to 4 washers in here between the pegboard and the pinboard. But for the slippers, I want the firmer fabric that I'm getting like this. And then, of course, when it's doubled, it will really be firm and warm. And air will get caught between the 2 layers. So we're wanting this to be solider than we might want it as a sweater. I recommend that you try it my way at least once and see if you don't feel, as I do, that for slippers a firmer fabric is better. Double thick slippers are not sized like ordinary socks. For ordinary socks, we take a really tight foot measurement or a relaxed foot measurement minus 1/2 inch. And that's the circumference that we want the sock to be. For these double thick slippers, for the exterior layer, we want the foot measurement relaxed plus 1/2 inch because these doubled layers take up some space of their own. So in this case, the actual relaxed foot measurement of the wearer is 8.5, and I'd make real socks at 8, but we're going to make these at 9. The same kind of thing happens for the length measurement. We add 1/2 inch to the true length measurement, and here we're getting 9.25, which is what we want for a foot that actually measures 8.75 inches in length. So add 1/2 inch to both dimensions. Do not use negative ease when knitting these slippers, though you normally do when knitting socks. In addition to knowing the desired foot measurements, we need to know the exact stitch and row gauge we're getting. I already know mine, 4 stitches, 6 rows per inch. You need to check yours by measuring a piece of the knitting, preferably more than an inch worth, and counting up the stitches in it. If you can do it across 4 inches or 10 centimeters, that's great. And just say, in that distance, you had 28 stitches. You'd put 28 divided by 4, and you'd know it was 7 stitches per inch if that's what you were working with. In European countries and everywhere that centimeters are in use, I think that generally the gauge is figured by 10 centimeter increments, so you wouldn't bother to divide if that's how you were doing it. But it's very important that you know, and working with that, you can either figure out your ideal circumference with mathematics, multiplying ideal circumference times stitches per inch, or ideal circumference in centimeters times stitches per centimeter. Or you can use the charts in my book, Socks of All Sorts for Knitting Looms, which encompass pretty much every likely gauge and every likely foot size. The foot lengths and circumferences, if you have a copy of this book, are on pages 3 and 4. The number of stitches to cast on is contained in a chart on page 5. The total rows are discussed on page 9. And the short rowing, which we'll get to in a while, there's an excellent short rowing chart that tells you how many stitches are involved, how many rows are involved, how long to short row, and so on page 15. If you're doing your own figuring, you should know that sock shaping works best when we work with the stitch count in multiples of 4. So for example, if you got 58 stitches as your number of stitches that would be ideal to cast on arithmetically, I would suggest rounding up to 60. Rounding up for slippers in this case, though for socks you may possibly decide to round down. But because of these being sized to fit over thick woolen socks and over the double layer, I think rounding up would probably be the smart way to go. So if you got a number such as 58, which is not divisible by 4, the nearest number that is divisible by 4 would be 60. 4 into 60 is 15. And then you would have an easier time with your short rows and your shaping in general.